Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today I'm going to be talking about how change comes when you're in it for the long haul. Rhiannon Osborne is a health justice advocate who believes that health is political and ecological. I really enjoyed learning from and talking with Rhiannon, so without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Rhiannon Osborne.
So I'm a final year medical student, and I would say that the work that I do comes from a place of a point in my training where I was really disillusioned because I felt that as health professionals, we were being asked to attempt and often not succeed at picking up the pieces of and just incredibly broken social and economic system. So the issue which I kind of like organize around, but it's obviously connected to lots of other issues, is like kind of comes under the umbrella term of health justice. And what health justice kind of is engaging with the what many of us know through like our lived experiences, but also like what we know through stories, through research, through so much, is that systems of oppression and injustice become embodied as health inequalities, as differential outcomes in health, as so many other different things, as mental and psychological illness. So the issue of health justice aims to organize around that point, not just at the point of health systems, right? Because when you're at a health system, kind of health systems are so important. Access to healthcare is so important, and that's something that I do work on a lot. But what health justice is really about is actually like abolishing the conditions of sickness in the first place, right? So like instead of asking like, okay, like how do we treat this person's diabetes, thinking on a bigger scale of like, okay, why does this person have diabetes? Is it because they are systematically denied access to food? Is it because they are under like intense amounts of stress because of workplace exploitation? Is it because they were displaced from their homeland by an extractive industry? Or is it because they are like in a super polluted area of the UK, which we know is like linked to a huge number of chronic diseases? And thinking about, okay, what are the political, social, economic, and environmental conditions which result in injustice, which then result in health inequalities? And obviously all of those things are super interlinked. So that's how I would say I organize, is around the idea of health justice, not just as being able to access healthcare when you need it, but like fundamentally abolishing a system which is built on like death and exploitation, basically, of people and planet, and building something else in its place. And then using health justice as a frame to contribute to the super varied different ways in which you can contribute to systemic change. So like I wouldn't call health justice the theory or anything for how to go about societal transformation. I think it's a contribution to kind of multi-dimensional movements, and it's super interrelated. And I would be embarrassed to be in this space if it wasn't super interrelated with things like police and prison abolition, with Black liberation, with environmental justice, with decolonization, with gender justice, and all of these different issues, disability justice, because like fundamentally these are all like embodied, these are all oppressions which become embodied, and these all come from a colonial capitalist system designed to exploit people and planet. So health justice is like the lens with which I work, and it's one way of contributing to movements for social transformation.
That's so interesting, and thank you for explaining all of that. So, you're talking about all of these topics that you're so passionate about and you're so knowledgeable about. So, I would love to know more about how you got started with doing this work. Can you tell me about that journey for you to really begin with your activism and your advocacy?
So I guess, yeah, for maybe some more context, like I do some research now, and research is a big part of what I do, but I spend the vast majority of my time doing kind of political organizing work. And I'm in that work kind of now. And I guess the alternative is that I'm not like trying to work for the WHO or the UN in global health, or I'm not trying to like work my way up the medical ladder. And I guess the reason why I'm in that space is, yeah, so many reasons, but because I think that the mass social movements are the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this mess, right? Because like we're in a system where we have like just horrendous global inequality, horrendous ecological collapse, and that is a system of power and profit. And then thinking about, okay, how do we build enough power to fight back against that system and to build something better? And I think that social movements are basically the only way we're going to do that. We're not going to be able to achieve like a just flourishing society where everyone is collectively liberated by like relying on billionaires who profit from the system to like magically do something nice. So I guess I'm in the space because, and the work that I do is because that I think that that's the most effective way to create change. And it's also a space where I learn a lot, where I grow a lot, where I have like a lot of loving friendships and relationships. So, and then how I got to that space was, I guess, being very, very disillusioned. And so maybe we're looking at, I don't know, maybe like it was building before this, but I guess probably the peak of disillusionment was around my second year of medical school, and being, really, really unhappy, really, really disillusioned, and feeling like, there must be something more to these problems, which I'm being told will be solved in XYZ ways. And I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. So and then I started getting involved with some student organizing. Then I took a bit of time out for my degree, did some internships, and basically was, I guess, lucky enough to be guided by some really wonderful people along the way who kind of saw that I kind of got it, but also needed more guidance, needed to learn a lot more. And really took my hand and introduced me to different organizing spaces. So like the first proper organizing space I was in is called Universities Allied for Essential Medicines, which is a global access to medicines kind of radical student movement. So, and then kind of once you've kind of started organizing, I think you quite quickly become, I think it's hard to stop once you've started, because it's just like, in many ways a really beautiful and wonderful space to be. So I'd say, and then kind of after that, as an access to medicines activist, was looking at a lot of issues around corporate power and neocolonialism, which leads you quite clearly into the climate crisis, and many other global issues. And local issues, because the global is the local and vice versa. But anyway, I digress. So I would say that it came from a place of disillusionment, and I am doing organizing now, which I'm really enjoying and really proud of, because lots of people along the way who have been doing this work for a lot longer than I have kind of took me in and showed me places to learn, places to grow, places to organize.
I think that's so interesting, and it spurs a lot of other questions for me. So I would love to talk more about when you mentioned the local and global connection in your work. Can you tell me some about the projects you're working on and how they may have both a global and a local impact? I'd love to know more about that connection between those different types of change in your mind.
Cool. I guess like the thing with systemic issues is that they can often feel like super kind of out of reach. Like you can see how they impact people's lives. You can see how they impact your life. But it's like, this is a huge, like a global system. This is capitalism. This is colonialism. This is like global racism. But these systems are like implemented and replicated at all levels, right? So they are like created at the international, the national, and the local levels. But fundamentally, maybe I wouldn't say fundamentally actually, but like we're in a crisis of care and disconnection in many ways. The neoliberal order teaches us not to care about each other, teaches us not to care about the land, not to care about non-human animals. And it teaches us that we are kind of homo economicus, just looking out for yourself. There's Margaret Thatcher famously saying that there's no society anymore, there's just individuals. And these are things which manifest kind of very in your face at the local level. So we often think of systems as kind of like these big things, but really they are the fabric of our communities. The ideologies which govern our economic system, all of these things manifest and are recreated and can be transformed or abolished and replaced in communities as well. So for example, like the place where I live, Cambridge, is the most unequal city in the UK. We have a university which I go to, which, you know, has a deep legacy of engaging with horrific industries and being part of the slave trade, and still to this day works with a lot of oil and arms companies. And this also manifests at the local level, where you have a situation where the university has a lot of money. Many of the people attending and working at the university have a lot of money. Not everyone, but like the university as an institution has a lot of money. And the rest of Cambridge is incredibly poor. And so lots of the work that I do is centered in my locality and trying to tackle inequality locally. So I'm part of a community kitchen. And I think lots of these projects that I talk about also center around the concept of mutual aid. And I think mutual aid is so incredibly important. And I think that, you know, in the context where corporations and the state are, you know, I mean, they're not designed to look after people, but they're not doing that, right? The showing up to care for each other is so important, especially in the context of the systems which tell you not to care about each other, right? Which tell you that you're just individuals. Because also, who are you doing this for if not your community? Not even just like in your locality, you know, like global community and global justice. We're doing this for people, right? We're doing this because we care about people and we love people. So it feels kind of strange to engage in like activism work and then at the same time be disconnected from people, right? Like so, and this is one of the many reasons why I think mutual aid is so important. I think there's practical aspects of mutual aid which are so important, like meeting people's needs in the context of a system which is refusing to do that and is actively causing harm. But then there's also things like the concept of rehearsing freedoms, right? Of like, okay, well, like how do we, if the system isn't going to change, how do we kind of practice and rehearse the world that we want to usher in, the world that we want to see in our communities? How can we act in a way which is in line with our values, and how can we try and bring that world into fruition in our own communities? So there's kind of like the practical, there's like birthing new worlds by trying to do things differently in the where you live. And then there's also the political, like there is no division really between political campaigning and meeting people's material needs, right? They're all so intertwined. Like it is an act of politics and an act of solidarity to feed your community, right? That's not separate to doing like campaigning on food justice. It is political to set up, like some of my friends have set up a solidarity fund where like people donate and there's no kind of state questions asked about why do you need this money, we don't believe that you need this money, but where we can do wealth redistribution within our community ourselves. So yeah, I've kind of like mentioned a couple of the projects I'm working on, but mostly they're to do with supporting people to survive through this violent system, supporting each other to survive through this violent system, through things like food cooperatives, kitchens, community gardens, community farms. But also I think the other really important thing is that if we're gonna do this, right, if we're serious about making mass systemic change, the people need to be mobilized. And I think like social media is useful in many ways, but like deep mobilizing, deep organizing comes from like developing bonds, often like place-based, but not just place-based, but community bonds, and developing, like it could be like a national campaign which has local chapters, for example, but building a strong movement needs to be so deeply connected to people that local organizing is an absolutely fundamental pillar of any campaign or any kind of strategy to try and achieve systemic change. So I think there's the practical, there's the organizing aspect, there's trying to like rehearse what it would be like to to live in a better world, and kind of playing around and experimenting with doing things differently. So yeah, I think that's why I love doing kind of local community work. Oh, and rehearsing freedoms is from Ruth Wilson Gilmore's concept that we need to rehearse the social order coming into being, to kind of envisage and practice new worlds. And I was introduced to that concept through a really great group called Healing Justice London. So yeah, just also to credit that as well.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I'm so glad that you touched on all of those topics, because I feel like I haven't really gotten to talk about some of them on the podcast, or not as much as I would have liked. So thank you so much for bringing them up. So I have one last question for you. Lots of young people want to create change and they want to make a difference, but they may not know where to get started with that work. Do you have any advice for those people who may be listening?
Yeah, I would say, firstly, that's great. Woo. But I think the second thing is there's like, try and rid yourself of the idea that change comes from exceptional individuals acting alone. Try and rid yourself of the idea that change comes from you kind of like changing what you buy, and then kind of think, okay, I guess there's a number of different ways in which you can get into organizing and get into kind of movements for systemic change. I think the first one is kind of take that step and realize it's not something that you can do on your own, right? So then the question is, okay, do I want to join a group? Do I want to join a community group? Do I want to join a campaigning group? Do I want to join a research group? And think about, okay, what are the skills which I have? And also, what are the things I enjoy? Like, what are the things I love doing? And think about what are the topics that you might want to work on. Obviously, everything is so interconnected, but think about, okay, where are the areas of interest which I have, which I might want to learn more about? What are the skills I have, or what is the work that I really enjoy doing? And then I think the first step is to find a group or a collective which resonates with you, and to then kind of join and get started and like just have an open mind and just kind of throw yourself in. And, you know, you can make tea if you want, you can run the social media campaign, you can run well-being sessions. Yeah, there's so many different things to do within movements, but I think the key to all of it is finding a group of people who you resonate with. And I think it's also really key because you don't have to join every single group, right? You can't join every single group, and you don't have to like every single group. Like, I think, you know, just a group may like say claim to be working on social justice issues, but may like have lots of problems with like internal discrimination or like super hierarchical practices. And you can say, okay, well, like that's not for me, right? So I think, finding a space where you feel like comfortable, valued, and you're kind of interested and passionate about the work that they're doing, I think is a great place to start. And I think those spaces are often closer to you than they think they are. Like, they might be geographically close to you in your community. They might be close to you through kind of touch points you already have in your life. So like your workplace, your school. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would say. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that, like, often when people get into kind of organizing work, there is this sense of urgency. And I definitely had that for a really, really long time of like, everything's so bad, I have to do everything so urgently, and I would burn out and get super tired. And I think the key thing is to remember is that this is generations struggle is like across centuries, right? Struggle is not like just you on your own like feeling that you want to do something. Like, being part of trying to make systemic change means joining like a beautiful and long lineage of different interconnected struggles against systems of oppression. So yes, especially with the climate crisis, things are really, really urgent, but try not to absorb the urgency culture that is kind of instilled in us too much, and be like, okay, I want to join the people who are working on this now, who've worked on this before, and approach it with humility. You know, I want to contribute. Where is the best way that I can contribute? And joy. I want to enjoy the work that I'm doing, and I guess kind of get ready to be in it for the long haul.
I learned so much from talking with Rhiannon, and I was so inspired when I finished up my conversation with her. I think Rhiannon's commitment to health justice, climate activism, and the other intersectional causes she's working on really comes through when she discusses those issues, and I was so motivated by that. I want to highlight Rhiannon's last few words of advice about being in it for the long haul. I think with Rhiannon's story, that phrase made me think not only about how long in terms of days, months, and years, but also about how much of herself Rhiannon has committed. Not only should you be ready to work for a long time on an issue like climate change, but you should also be ready to commit a lot of your energy, your brain power, and your heart to that issue as well, which I think is all part of the long haul when it comes to activism. I think through her commitment to her intersectional activism, Rhiannon really embodies her own advice, and I think her story is an example of how change comes when you're in it for the long haul. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Rhiannon on Instagram at Osborne_Rhiannon to get connected with her. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at bethechangepodcast. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.